You didn't come here to be taught. You came because something ancient inside you remembers. A quiet ache like the echo of a question you've carried across lifetimes. Maybe you're tired, not just from today, but from always asking, what is time? Where does thought begin? Why do you feel like you've been here before, in a life that wasn't yours, under stars that no longer exist? If this is only a dream, why does it ache so beautifully tonight? We won't chase truth. We'll lie beside it, like two travelers listening to the same darkness. These questions don't want answers. They want space. And you deserve to fall asleep not to silence, but to wonder. Let your hands unclench. Let your spine soften. Take one deep breath. Then another. Slower now. Let your breath forget your name. If this voice feels like home, you're welcome to subscribe or simply stay. And if one of these mysteries touches you, leave a whisper in the comments. I remember this too. Now close your eyes gently. Let us begin not with an answer, but with the question that has never stopped returning. Who were you before you were aware of yourself? Section 1. Where does consciousness come from? The greatest mystery. How do thoughts arise from biology? You close your eyes, but the thoughts don't stop. They flicker like fireflies in the dark of your skull. Not quite light, not quite noise. Where do they come from? Who is thinking you? Right now, this is the question no one, not the physicists, not the monks, not the philosophers, has ever answered fully. And yet, it is the one question closest to your breath. What is this thing inside you? Watching from behind your eyes, you lie here in silence, but the mind hums. It hums not like a machine, but like a forest, growing quietly behind your bones. Electrical pulses race through your neurons. Yes, but how does that spark become a thought? How does tissue create sorrow, memory, or the sensation of blue? For centuries, thinkers have tried to name it. René Descartes thought the mind and body were two separate things. A duality. The body is physical, but the mind floats above it. But his idea raised more questions than it answered. How do they connect? Where do you live in the brain? Or behind it? Later came materialists who said everything is brain. Your joy is chemicals. Your love is dopamine. And your sense of self is an illusion, stitched together by biology. But if that's true, why does it feel like more? Right now, as you lie here, your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, each one a tiny city of electricity. They fire in patterns, build networks, evolve over time. We can scan them, we can name them, but we still cannot explain why it feels like anything to be you. The philosopher David Chalmers called this the hard problem of consciousness. It's not about how the brain functions. We understand that in part. It's about how it feels. Why does any of this experience have a flavor? Why is seeing a sunset not just data, but beauty? You begin to drift, and your thoughts feel less like objects, more like winds, like pages fluttering open in a book you never wrote. Are you the writer, or just the reader? Some traditions, like Vedanta, say consciousness was here before the body, that it is not an effect of the brain, but the source of it. The body is a costume. The mind is a lens. But what looks through the lens? Who is watching? Others, like panpsychists, suggests something strange and ancient, that maybe all matter is conscious, just in degrees. A stone dreams differently than you do, but it still dreams. There is no dead matter, only slower minds. You reach for sleep, but your mind is wide like a sky. Inside it, stars flicker with questions. What if consciousness is not produced, but revealed, like mist curling off a mountain? Your thoughts drift over ancient paths. A child staring at clouds. A monk listening to silence. A physicist watching particles dance in patterns too precise to be chance. And all of them quietly asking, where does this awareness come from? Who is it that knows I am here? No one knows. Not really. But the question remains not to be solved, but to be heard. So, breathe again. Slower now. Let the question echo like a bell inside your chest. If thoughts come from the brain, who is it that watches them arise? Section 2. Do we really have free will? If the brain decides before you're aware, do you still choose? You open your eyes in the quiet. Or perhaps you don't. Perhaps the choice was already made before you felt it, before you knew. The question lingers like the shadow of a whisper. Did you choose to be here? Or were you simply arriving at a decision the brain had already made? In the soft murmur of late-night thought, one of the oldest and most unsettling questions returns. Do you really have free will? Somewhere in your skull, electricity dances. It's measured in milliseconds, pulses leaping between neurons like sparks in the dark. You lift a finger, blink an eye, take a breath. But the choice, the feeling of choice, is slow. It arrives after the action has already begun. You think you chose, but what if the decision had already been made? This isn't philosophy anymore. It's neuroscience. In the 1980s, a scientist named Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that would ripple through decades of thought. Participants were asked to flex their wrists whenever they felt the urge. Libet measured two things: the exact moment they felt the urge and the brain's electrical activity leading up to it. The result: the brain initiated the movement more than 300 milliseconds before participants were consciously aware of deciding to move. The body was already acting, while the self was still catching up. So, then what is you? A narrator for actions already in motion. A witness to the illusion of control. You lie still, and yet the questions swirl. If the brain makes decisions before you're conscious of them, are you free? Or are you a story told after the fact? Philosophers have long danced around this. In ancient Greece, the Stoics believed in a world ruled by fate, a cosmic order so perfect that nothing could unfold otherwise. And yet, they still taught freedom not of events, but of attitude. You may not control the storm, but you control how you sail through it. In the East, Buddhism offers another view that the self is not fixed, and that desire itself is part of a chain conditioned by causes you cannot see. Free will, perhaps, but only when you let go of the I that clings to control. And yet, in your chest, there is still the ache of agency. You feel it when you make a choice that costs you, when you say yes to love or no to fear, when you hesitate at the cliff of consequence, knowing that what you choose will shape who you become. Maybe free will is not a button, but a gradient, a slow sunrise between instinct and intention. You dream of a labyrinth. In it, some doors are closed, some are open. You didn't choose the maze, but within its walls, you still wander. You still pause. You still choose which echoes to follow. Modern neuroscience complicates things further. It tells us our decisions are shaped by genetics, environment, trauma, culture, neurochemistry. Did you choose your brain, your upbringing, your triggers? And yet, why does it matter so deeply to you whether you're free? Why does the heart resist the idea of pure programming? Even Daniel Dennett, a philosopher of the mind, argues that free will is real not in spite of the brain's complexity, but because of it. Your ability to reflect, imagine, weigh outcomes. This is a freedom emergent, not absolute. A freedom made of memory, emotion, story, and attention. Perhaps your choices are like waves shaped by gravity, wind, and tide, but still your own movement, your own path across the ocean of possibility. You think of the moments that defined you. They weren't automatic. They were messy, agonizing, slow. You wrestled with them. You paused. You asked, who am I? If I do this, that pause, maybe that's where freedom lives. So you lie here, the weight of the blanket soft on your chest. Your thoughts begin to drift, and you ask one last thing. If the brain starts before you, if the action arrives first, then what is this feeling of choosing? Maybe the truth isn't binary. Maybe free will isn't an on-off switch. Maybe it's a field and some parts of you are more free than others. The reflex is automatic. The hunger is ancient. But the kindness, the patience, the forgiveness, those take effort. They take resistance. They take you. And perhaps that's what freedom is. Not the power to do anything, but the strength to choose what you wish to become even when the world pushes otherwise. So breathe again. Let that breath be slow. And let the question linger, unsolved. Like music fading in a dream. If you weren't fully free, would that make your courage any less real? Section 3. Is time real? Or just a perception? According to relativity, time is flexible, is now even real. You glance at the clock. The numbers change. The world moves. But deep inside, you know time doesn't quite feel like it ticks, it flows. It stretches. It disappears. Sometimes it races ahead of you. Sometimes it softens into stillness. And sometimes, like now, it vanishes entirely. So you lie here, asking not just what time is, but whether it's real at all. We were all raised to believe time is a line past, present, future, a neat arrow that moves forward in one direction. But science disagrees. In Einstein's theory of relativity, time is not absolute. It is relative to motion, gravity, and perspective. There is no single now that exists for everyone. Time bends. It warps. It slows down near black holes. It speeds up when you move faster. It is woven together with space, not a clock, but a fabric. You blink. What does that mean? It means that what you call the present moment may not exist, not objectively. According to relativity, two people moving at different speeds will disagree on when now happens. And both of them are correct. You picture two astronauts orbiting a distant planet. One moves slightly faster than the other. When they reunite, one has aged less, just a few seconds. But still, they lived different lengths of time. So, what is the present? Then, is it real? Or just local? A shadow we mistake for something solid. Philosophers have long suspected this. The ancient Greek thinker Parmenides claimed that time is an illusion, that everything that exists all at once. Later, Augustine of Hippo confessed, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it, I do not. And you feel it not as seconds, but as stories. The past arrives as memory, the future as imagination, the present as a breath that's already gone. Sleep softens the illusion even more. You dream, and time becomes meaningless. A lifetime happens in a minute, or a minute feels like forever. In dreams, you visit childhood, speak to the dead, walk through futures that never came true. Is that imagination, or is it what time really is? Beneath the structure we try to impose, even in neuroscience, time is slippery. Your brain reconstructs sequences after they happen. When you touch something hot, your hand pulls away before you consciously register the pain. Then, your brain invents the feeling of instant reaction. But it wasn't instant. You edited time to make it feel coherent. Right now, you're lying still, but your thoughts can flash through years. You remember something from when you were 6. You worry about something that might happen next year. And in both cases, it feels real. You move through time like a traveler moving through fog, never quite certain where the road ends or began. Modern physics offers even stranger answers. The concept of block time, supported by many physicists, suggests that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously like a loaf of bread, where every slice is already there. You are simply moving through one slice at a time, like a flashlight sweeping across a frozen landscape. But if that's true, then your future already exists. So do all your past mistakes, all your unlived lives. You are not a being in time. You are time, unfolding one frame at a time. There is a quiet terror in this, but also a strange peace. You no longer need to rush. You are already everywhere you're meant to be. The MIT OpenCourseWare lectures on time physics explain this with precision equations, charts, models. But you are not here for math. You are here for something softer. The feeling that time might be not linear, but layered. You think of the Andean view of time where the past is in front of you, because you can see it, and the future is behind you, because it is unknown. Or the Aboriginal concept of dream time where all ancestral time coexists with the present, like a great sacred rhythm always playing beneath the surface. In these worldviews, time is not a ticking mechanism. It is a circle, a song, a season. You remember a moment you wish you could change. You imagine one you hope will arrive, but both feel equally vivid, equally alive. So, what is now? Is it just the place where memory and desire shake hands? Your breath slows, your eyelids soften. You realize time can be measured in hours, or in heartbreaks, in laughter, in questions. Perhaps the most real parts of time are not minutes but meaning. So, let go. Let the ticking fade. The clock was never the true measure. It was always you. Breathe now. Let time dissolve like a sugar cube in warm tea. And let the question remain, soft but undying. If the future already exists, what does that make you? Section 4. What came before the universe? Can something emerge from absolute nothingness? You drift further now into the dark before thought, before memory, into a silence so deep, even the stars had not yet learned to whisper. And in that silence, the question arrives. What came before all of this? Before light? Before space? Before even the idea of time? You've always lived inside a story that begins. A childhood, a sunrise, a first word. But what if the universe itself had no beginning you can touch? What if nothing is not the absence of something but a kind of presence we simply don't yet understand? Physicists used to imagine a void a perfect vacuum where not even light could exist. But modern cosmology tells a stranger tale. Even the most empty space is restless. Beneath it, quantum fields ripple with possibility, giving rise to particles that flicker into and out of being like ghosts. From this quantum sea, some say, the universe was born. The physicist Lawrence Krauss argues this directly. In his book, A Universe from Nothing, he explains how, under the rules of quantum mechanics and gravity, a universe can spontaneously appear out of nothing. No divine spark, no first mover, just the rules of physics. Playing dice with eternity. But here's the twist. The nothing he speaks of isn't absolute nothing. It's a kind of something afield, a law, a rule book, a stage already set for reality to emerge. So then, what came before the laws? What came before the possibility of possibility? You lie beneath your ceiling like a traveler beneath a foreign sky. And somewhere deep in you, in the quiet place where thought meets wonder, you feel the immensity of that question press against your breath. Philosophers call this the metaphysical abyss. It's the place where reasoning breaks, where no cause can be found, because cause itself hasn't been born yet. In the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the entry on cosmology explores this riddle. It speaks of initial singularities, eternal inflation, cyclic models theories that try to dodge the need for a before. Because in many models, time itself is thought to begin with the universe. There was no before, because there was no when. And yet, your heart resists that. It wants a picture, a spark, a breath in the darkness, a hand reaching out. Something. Religious texts offer answers, but they too begin with mystery. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But even here we are not told where God comes from, only that he was. The Hindu Rig Veda asks the same in its ancient hymns. Who really knows, who shall declare it? Whence was it born? Whence came this creation? The gods are later than this world's formation. Who then knows whence it first came into being? You see, even the oldest scriptures did not pretend to know. They left space for mystery, for reverence, for silence. Perhaps the question isn't just scientific. Perhaps it's poetic, like asking, what came before the first note of music? The silence, or the listener's longing? You imagine standing at the edge of everything. No stars, no gravity, no motion, and suddenly, from nowhere, a ripple, a flash, a beginning. But who was there to witness it? And how can anything begin without a time in which to begin it? Some theories, like eternal inflation, suggest our universe is just one bubble in an endless cosmic foam universes birthing universes forever. But this only moves the mystery up one level. What made the foam? Others propose the universe has always existed, not as a line, but as a loop, a cosmic cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. In this view, there is no origin point, only recurrence, like a wheel turning beneath the skin of time. But none of these answers are complete. They are maps of a land no one has seen. So you return to the question, gently, as if holding a feather in the dark. What came before the first moment? Was there ever truly nothing? Or was there always something waiting to be known? You breathe slowly now. The mind wants to grasp, but the soul knows how to drift. So let yourself float in that place before creation, where mystery is not a threat, but a lullaby. Because maybe the beauty is not in the answer. Maybe it's in the knowing that we don't know and in the wonder that still pulses, even in the dark. So rest here. You are part of the question, and that is enough. 5. Why is there something instead of nothing? A timeless question that haunts both science and philosophy. You lie still, staring at the dark. Not the kind of darkness that comes from closed eyes or a moonless night, but the idea of true nothingness. No stars, no you, no thoughts, no space in which things could exist, no laws for things to follow. Nothing. And yet, here we are. The question sounds simple, even childlike. Why is there something instead of nothing? But it's one of the deepest and most haunting questions the human mind has ever asked. For centuries, philosophers, theologians, and physicists have tried to pull back the curtain on this mystery, only to find more layers underneath, each one stranger than the last. The 17th century philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz was one of the first to phrase it clearly. Why is there something rather than nothing? He believed that the answer could not lie within the physical universe itself, but required a necessary being, something eternal, like God. A being that must exist, and from which all other things could emerge. His logic wasn't religious dogma, but an attempt to solve a cosmic puzzle. For Leibniz, a universe simply popping into being without reason was philosophically unacceptable. Martin Heidegger, writing in the 20th century, took a darker approach. He called this the fundamental question of metaphysics, and rather than offering an answer, he dove deep into the emotional texture of the question itself. Heidegger believed that truly confronting the nothing, really staring into the void, brought about a kind of existential anxiety, the kind of dread that makes you suddenly aware that your being is precarious, contingent. It didn't have to be. And that terrifying truth is what makes it beautiful. Modern cosmologists have tried to offer scientific explanations. Lawrence Krauss, in his book A Universe from Nothing, proposed that quantum mechanics may allow for something to arise from what we think of as nothing. But his nothing isn't truly nothing. It's a vacuum state with quantum potential, governed by physical laws. And that's the catch if laws exist. If there's still a mathematical structure behind it, then it's not the nothing we're talking about. The real question asks, why do the laws themselves exist? Why is there any possibility at all? Some theories suggest that nothing is unstable, that the default state of reality is actually something. That nothing can't even persist because of quantum fluctuations. But again, this assumes a quantum field already exists. That there's a platform on which randomness can operate. So even in the most advanced physics, the real philosophical nothing remains untouched. There's also the anthropic angle. The idea that we observe something because only in a universe with something could an observer exist. If all possible realities exist, including ones with nothing, then only those with structures and beings would ever contain someone to ask the question. But this feels like a sidestep. It explains why we're asking the question, but not why there's something to ask about. Some thinkers wonder if the question itself is flawed. That nothing is not a real state, it's just the absence of something, and can't exist on its own. Just like cold is not a thing, but the absence of heat. But if nothing is just a mental construct, then why do we even have a concept for it? Why does it press so heavily on the mind? Like a question buried in our bones. Others lean toward mathematical Platonism, the belief that abstract mathematical forms exist independently of the physical universe. If so, maybe something always had to exist, even if it was just the raw, silent perfection of numbers. Perhaps reality unfolds from these eternal forms, and the physical world is simply one expression of an inevitable truth. Still, none of these views settle the matter. If there were absolutely nothing, no matter, no time, no space, no laws, no being, how could something possibly begin? What causes something if there is no time in which causes can happen? What does beginning even mean when there is no time? And even more chilling, is it possible that the question has no answer, because we're not capable of asking it properly? That our brains, shaped by evolution to survive and reproduce, just aren't wired to understand reality at its deepest level? This question lives in the silence between thoughts. It echoes in the spaces where science ends and awe begins. You can't solve it, and maybe you're not meant to, but you can feel it. Like a soft pressure just beneath waking. Like a presence that isn't a presence. Like something instead of nothing. And maybe that's the miracle, that the question exists at all. That there is you, lying here in the dark, wondering, is there life after death? Near-death experiences, theology, and neuroscience offer no final answer. You lie still, breath slowing, the edge of consciousness slipping into silence. And yet, the question lingers in the dark. Is this the end? Or is it just the beginning of something else? Something unseen, unspeakable, and eternal. For thousands of years, humans have asked what happens after we die. From sacred scriptures to operating rooms, from Tibetan rituals to brain scans, we've searched for signs, but the mystery remains. What follows death is either everything or nothing at all. In hospitals across the world, people speak of moments after flatlining. They float above their bodies, observe the room, drift through tunnels toward light. These stories, known as near-death experiences, NDEs, have been documented in thousands of cases. The Journal of Near-Death Studies and researchers like Dr. Bruce Grayson have cataloged them: overwhelming peace, heightened awareness, and often a life review. But what are they, visions of the soul departing? Or hallucinations from a dying brain starved of oxygen? Some neurologists suggest that NDEs arise from brain activity in the temporoparietal junction, the region linked to out-of-body sensations. Others note that ketamine, a dissociative anesthetic, can replicate NDE-like states. A 2013 study from the University of Michigan found a surge in brain activity in rats, seconds after cardiac arrest, a final electrical storm that may produce vivid perceptions. But if death is a shutdown, how can the mind seem so vividly alive? Religions have long offered answers sacred, symbolic, and sometimes fearsome. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo Thodol, often known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes a 49-day journey of the soul through dreamlike realms after death, encountering deities, illusions, and karmic reflections. Salvation or rebirth depends on clarity of mind at the moment of death. In this tradition, consciousness continues but must navigate terrifying beauty before peace. Christianity teaches something else, that life is eternal but divided. The Catholic Catechism speaks of the soul facing immediate judgment, entering either heaven, purgatory, or hell. The soul is seen as indivisible and immortal, its fate bound to divine justice and grace. To believers, death is not an end. It is a homecoming, or a trial. In ancient Egypt, the Book of the Dead guided the soul through a literal underworld. In Hinduism, death leads to samsara, the endless cycle of rebirth, unless liberation moksha is achieved. In Islam, the soul is questioned in the grave by angels Munkar and Nakir, then awaits final resurrection. Across all these, a pattern emerges. Death is not a wall, but a passage. Yet, for the secular mind, afterlife may seem like wishful thinking. The brain, composed of neurons and chemistry, is seen as the seat of consciousness. When the brain ceases, where would the mind go? Scientists argue that no evidence supports the continuation of personal identity after death. From this view, the afterlife is a comforting narrative, a way for frightened brains to face oblivion. But this certainty is not so certain. Modern physics opens unexpected doors. If time is not linear, if all moments coexist, as relativity hints, could the moment of consciousness be eternal from its own point of view? As Einstein wrote in a letter after a friend's death, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Some philosophers have suggested that personal death is less dramatic than we think. Thomas Metzinger, a German philosopher of mind, argues that the self is a construct, a user illusion created by the brain. If that illusion dissolves, who is left to experience death? Perhaps death is not something you experience because you were never a fixed thing. Still, the universality of belief in the afterlife cannot be dismissed. From Aboriginal Dreamtime to Amazonian soul journeys, cultures across the world envision continuity. Why do we all, in some form, resist the idea of a complete end? Could memory, spirit, or pattern somehow persist, even if our current science can't detect it? There's also the question of shared death experiences. Hospice workers and family members sometimes report feeling an invisible presence when someone dies, a wind, a light, a message. A 2022 study published in Palliative Medicine reviewed such reports, noting their frequency and similarity across cultures. Are they coincidences or glimpses of a shared crossing? Quantum theories have occasionally been invoked, often controversially, to suggest that consciousness may not be confined to the brain. The OR theory by Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose posits that quantum events in microtubules could link brain activity to a universal field. Critics remain skeptical. But if mind emerges from fundamental physical processes, perhaps death only shifts the pattern. In the end, we face two possibilities. Either consciousness ends as a candle blown out, or it continues transformed, scattered, perhaps reassembled elsewhere. Neither idea is provable, but both reshape how we live. To imagine death as total silence is to cherish each moment more. To imagine life beyond death is to shape our lives with meaning, morality, and hope. Whether the truth is silence or symphony, it teaches us how to love the present more fully. And maybe that's the real gift of the question. Not in its answer, but in the way it makes us pause. In the way it lifts our eyes toward a mystery we may never grasp, yet always feel. Section 7. Do dreams mean anything? Why do dreams feel so vivid, emotional, and real? You drift, and the dream arrives not like a guest, but like a memory that forgot it wasn't invited. It spills across your sleeping mind in colors that never existed, with sounds that whisper your name from lifetimes you don't remember living. In the stillness of night, you float through corridors made of impossible architecture. Speak with people you've never met yet somehow miss, and wake with the strange ache of having just returned from something more real than waking life. Why? Why do dreams feel like they carry secrets? Why does your heart still race from the dream that never happened? Why do you wake and feel like you lost something beautiful? Something that meant something? You're not alone in asking. For millennia, humans have believed that dreams carry meaning. The ancient Egyptians saw them as messages from the gods. The Greeks had temples for dream healing, called Asclepions, where the ill would sleep and hope for divine visions. In the Aboriginal Dreamtime, dreams are not passive experiences, but portals into a sacred, eternal reality that existed before and beneath this one. But what does science say? Neuroscience sees dreaming as a neurological process, arising primarily during REM rapid eye movement sleep, when the brain's activity mimics wakefulness. Studies from PubMed and the National Institute of Neurological Disorders show that during REM sleep, the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, is highly active. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and logic, goes quiet. That's why your dreams feel so emotional, yet so illogical. It's like your heart is speaking in images, while your mind has taken the night off. But even if they are born of biology, does that make them meaningless? Carl Jung didn't think so. In his deeply influential work, Man and His Symbols, Jung proposed that dreams are the psyche's way of communicating with the conscious self. He saw dreams as expressions of the unconscious, rich with archetypes, universal patterns that show up in myths, legends, and, yes, your private midnight cinema. In dreams, he believed, you meet parts of yourself you've ignored, repressed, or never known. To Jung, a snake wasn't just a snake. It might be a symbol of transformation, sexuality, or rebirth. A house wasn't just a house, it might represent the self, or hidden layers of your psyche. The dream wasn't nonsense. It was a symbolic message, coded in metaphor. Yet, Freud, his once friend and later rival, had a different take. Freud believed dreams were largely about repressed desires, especially of a sexual or aggressive nature. He saw them as the royal road to the unconscious, but a road littered with wish fulfillment, taboo impulses, and symbolic disguise. You may not agree with either of them, and maybe that's the point. Dreams refuse to be tamed by a single theory. They stretch across anthropology, psychology, and biology like mist across a field. There's a strange consensus among dream researchers: we still don't fully understand them. Some theories say dreams help us regulate emotions. Others say they help encode memory. Others suggest they're random noise, your brain's way of reorganizing and rebooting. Yet, you still feel something in them. That recurring dream you have about the ocean, or the house, or the person who never speaks doesn't feel random. It feels loaded, haunted, heavy with meaning. As if your soul is trying to leave you breadcrumbs in the dark. And then there are the dreams that predict. People across cultures report precognitive dreams, visions of future events that later come true. Science has no explanation for this, nor does it have one for shared dreams, where two people report eerily similar visions. Are these coincidence, pattern recognition? Or are dreams a bridge between minds? Across time, in many cultures, the dream world is a space not less real than waking life, but more real. The Islamic scholar Ibn Sirin wrote one of the first dream interpretation manuals in the 8th century. In it, he argued that certain dreams come directly from God, while others come from the self, or even from dark forces. Similarly, the Tibetan Bardo Thodol suggests that dreams are a form of training for death, that by mastering lucidity in dreams, one may recognize the illusions of the afterlife and escape rebirth. Even modern psychology takes dreams seriously in trauma therapy. Nightmares, recurring dreams, and sleep paralysis are now seen as vital clues to emotional wounds. Trauma often speaks in images long before it surfaces in words. And in that sense, your dreams may be telling the truth, even if they don't speak your language. So, what do dreams mean? Maybe they mean what you need them to. Maybe they're the theater where your soul rehearses, where old feelings rise from the deep, where your ancestors whisper in riddles. Or maybe they mean nothing at all, just neurons firing in beautiful, chaotic rhythm. But tonight, when you dream, you'll still wake with the sense that something just happened. Something strange. Something that mattered. And maybe that's all the meaning you need. 8. Why do ancient cultures share the same symbols? The serpent, the eye, the wheel, whispers from a collective dream. You've seen them before, though you may not know how or why. Twin serpents winding upward like a spine of memory. An all-seeing eye staring from pyramids, temples, dollar bills. A wheel of fire or sun or time, spinning in the sky across continents. You've seen them in Egypt and Peru, in Tibet and Greece, among the Hopi, the Maya, the Celts, and maybe tonight, in the shadowy space between waking and sleep. You're wondering, why do these ancient symbols appear everywhere? How could people separated by oceans and millennia etch the same visions into stone? It's a question that has haunted mythologists, philosophers, and neuroscientists alike. What if, deep beneath language and geography, humanity dreams the same dreams? Let's start with something simple. The serpent. It curls through time as one of the oldest symbols in human consciousness. The Hopi snake dance mimics its slithering rhythm. The Norse world serpent coils around existence itself. The Hindu kundalini spirals like twin snakes along the spine, awakening divine energy. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl rises as the feathered serpent, a god of wind, wisdom, and rebirth. In the Bible, a serpent tempts Eve toward knowledge. In medicine, the caduceus. Two serpents entwined becomes a symbol of healing. What does it mean that cultures across time have seen something sacred, even divine, in the body of a snake? Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, thought it meant everything. He proposed that such images are not merely cultural artifacts, they arise from what he called the collective unconscious. It's not memory passed from parent to child, but something older, an ancient blueprint embedded deep in the mind of every human. Symbols like the serpent, the eye, the wheel, the tree. These are archetypes, Jung said, born from the shared psychic structures of our species, in man and his symbols. Jung writes that these forms arise in dreams and myths alike, not because we learn them from books, but because they are already within us, emerging like smoke from the inner fire of the soul. But others take a more grounded view. Perhaps, they say, the similarities come not from shared memory, but shared need. The sun gives life. The snake kills and sheds its skin. The wheel turns like the seasons. The eye watches, judges, protects. Maybe these shapes and forces are simply the most obvious metaphors for survival. Rebirth, divinity. Joseph Campbell, mythologist, teacher, and seeker of universal patterns, believed both were true. In The Power of Myth, he described what he called the monomyth, a single story that echoes through every culture, in which a hero leaves the ordinary world, journeys into darkness, and returns transformed. The symbols of that journey: the serpent transformation, the eye awakening, the wheel eternity, appear not just in stories, but in architecture, art, and ritual. Campbell believed they came from the inner landscape, the psychic terrain every human travels in dream and death and rebirth. But is there evidence for this? Anthropologists studying indigenous cultures around the world, from the Dogon of Mali to the Aboriginal Dreamtime, have documented eerily similar cosmologies. Stars are often seen as ancestors, rivers as spirits, mountains as gods. The spiral recurs in rock art across 5 continents, sometimes carved in isolation by people who never met. Coincidence, or something deeper? One theory gaining attention is that certain patterns, like spirals, eyes, or snakes, may arise from the structure of the brain itself. Neuroscientist Richard Sitowich and others have explored how certain hallucinations, such as those caused by migraines or altered states, produce recurring visual motifs: tunnels, spirals, and checkerboards. These patterns, called form constants, may emerge from how visual processing occurs in the occipital lobe. If so, then perhaps some of humanity's sacred symbols are not cultural, but biological, encoded in the very folds of the mind. And yet, that doesn't explain their meaning. It explains why we might see them, but not why we feel them to be sacred, eternal, True. The ancient Egyptians believed the eye of Horus healed and protected the soul. The Tibetans use the eye in mandalas to center consciousness. The third eye appears across Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist traditions. It is the eye that sees beyond into the inner world, into dreams, death, the divine, even the wheel, which seems so practical as a tool. A technology takes on spiritual meaning. The Dharma wheel in Buddhism represents the Eightfold Path. The medicine wheel in native traditions reflects the seasons of life. The solar chariot in Greek mythology carries the sun across the sky. Across traditions, wheels represent more than motion. They represent cycles the way life turns, decays, and renews. They are maps of impermanence and invitations to remember that time is not linear but circular, rhythmic, eternal. So, what does all this mean for you here? Now, drifting in the quiet stillness before sleep. It means that when you dream of spirals or eyes or snakes, you may be touching something far older than yourself. You may be remembering what your ancestors saw when they first looked at the stars, or felt the sun on stone, or watched a snake shed its skin and vanish into grass. You may be living for a moment inside a symbol shared by souls across time. And perhaps, in that symbol, you are not alone. You are part of a memory. Humanity has never lost, only forgotten for a little while. Sleep now, and let those symbols rise again. Let them take you back not just through your own life, but into the dreams of those who walked this world long before you. Nix. Who built Göbekli Tepe and why the world's oldest temple? Intentionally buried 11,000 years ago. You walk through a field of soft grasses in southeastern Turkey. Beneath your feet lies a mystery older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older even than the stories we tell around fire. It's called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, a name as modest as the place is profound. When archaeologists unearthed it in the 1990s, what they found shattered our sense of ancient history. Here, in the cradle of civilization, stand rings of T-shaped pillars carved with animals, foxes, snakes, wild boars, birds. Some weigh up to 20 tons. Some are so carefully shaped they seem impossible without metal tools. And yet Göbekli Tepe predates the invention of the wheel, pottery, and agriculture. You pause at one of the enclosures. Two massive pillars face each other, like silent sentinels. On one, a high-relief carving of a vulture spreads its wings. On another, a headless man. All this was created over 11,000 years ago, at a time when humans were supposed to be nomadic. Foraging bands, not temple builders. So who built Göbekli Tepe? No skeletons have been found. No signs of daily life. No homes. No hearths. No middens of garbage. Just sacred architecture. This suggests it wasn't a settlement. It was a site of ritual. The builders came here for a purpose. But what? Was it a place for ancestor worship? A site to map the stars? An altar to animal spirits? Or something stranger? A kind of psychological engine designed to bring people together into symbolic memory. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist who led its excavation until his death in 2014, believed this site was not the result of agriculture, but its cause. In other words, we didn't settle down and then build temples. We built temples and then settled down. The need to worship, to gather, may have given birth to farming itself. That single idea that spirituality led to civilization, not the other way around, reframes everything we thought we knew about human origins. And what's more curious, the site was buried, intentionally, around 8000 BCE. The people who once worshipped here filled the enclosures with dirt and sand, sealing them like tombs. We don't know why. Was it out of reverence fear, or had they moved on to something new? Even the symbols at Göbekli Tepe speak in riddles. The twin pillars might represent humans, or deities. The scorpions, vultures, and snakes. Are they myths, calendars, echoes of dreams? Some researchers, such as Andrew Collins, suggest Göbekli Tepe's design reflects astronomical alignments. One enclosure appears to point toward the star Sirius, but critics argue this may be coincidence. No written language existed then. We can't know for sure. Joseph Campbell once said that myths are public dreams. And here, carved in stone, may be the world's oldest dreamscape, one we no longer understand, but still feel. Because when you stand among these buried circles, there's a quiet awe, not fear, not clarity, something between. You feel that someone, some group loved meaning so much that they carved it into stone, then buried it in the earth like a seed. And now, it's growing again in our wonder, in our questions. You walk away, but the stone foxes follow you in your thoughts. Were they guardians' memories, or just the echoes of a forgotten sacred language? In the silence of Göbekli Tepe, we don't find answers, but we find the proof that we've been asking questions for a very long time. 10. Could the universe be a simulation? A real theory discussed by physicists and philosophers alike. You're sitting there, reading this. The light around you feels real. The air has weight. The fabric beneath you touches your skin with quiet certainty. But what if all of it, your body, your room? This very sentence is no more than a line of code. What if reality, as you know it, is the output of a cosmic computer, ticking away in some inconceivable dimension? This isn't science fiction. It's one of the most debated philosophical questions of our time. Could the universe be a simulation? The idea was famously brought to academic prominence by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003 in his paper, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation?, published in the journal Philosophical Quarterly. Bostrom argued that one of the following must be true. 1. Civilizations never reach a level of technological maturity capable of running ancestor simulations. 2. Such civilizations lose interest in running them. Or 3. We are almost certainly living in one. He reasoned that if future civilizations could simulate billions of conscious beings, and they chose to do so, then the number of simulated minds would vastly outnumber original biological minds. Statistically, you would be one of the former. It's a chilling thought. But how seriously should we take it? Let's start with what we know. In the world of computing, Moore's law has seen exponential growth in processing power for decades. We've gone from Pong to photorealistic open-world simulations in a single lifetime. Artificial intelligence is now capable of generating human-like conversation, art, even music. If this trajectory continues, it's not far-fetched to imagine a world in which entire conscious ecosystems could be simulated, down to the neuron. But could consciousness itself be coded? That's where things get metaphysically tricky. The simulation hypothesis doesn't require us to solve the hard problem of consciousness. It only requires that the simulated beings believe themselves to be conscious. If your entire world were generated by a computer, but your sensations, memories, and emotions felt real, would you even know? Physicists have also toyed with the idea. In 2012, theoretical physicist Silas Bean and colleagues from the University of Bonn proposed a way to test the hypothesis. They suggested that certain anomalies in the energy of cosmic rays, such as a limit on the energy of particles, could imply an underlying grid structure in spacetime, like pixels in a simulation. It was speculative, of course, but not dismissed outright. Even Elon Musk has famously said, "There's a 1 in billions chance we're in base reality," arguing that it's more likely we're in a simulation than not, given the potential abundance of simulated worlds. But simulation theory runs deeper than tech talk. It touches something ancient: the idea that the world is illusion. In Hinduism, the concept of Maya describes the world as a kind of spiritual illusion real to the senses, but not the ultimate truth. In Plato's allegory of the cave, humans mistake shadows on the wall for reality, never realizing there's a greater world beyond. Simulation theory is, in many ways, a digital age version of these age-old metaphors. There are also unsettling implications. If the universe is a simulation, then someone or something is running it. A creator, a programmer. Are we experiments entertainment? Are there rules we aren't meant to uncover? Or perhaps it's more comforting to think that we are the creators, that somewhere, in a future unrecognizable to us, our distant descendants simulate lives like ours to learn, to remember, to understand. Yet critics remain skeptical. Philosopher David Chalmers, a leading thinker on consciousness, argues that even if we are in a simulation, it doesn't invalidate our experiences. If the simulated apple tastes sweet, then sweet it is. If love feels real, then it is. In this view, simulation is not illusion. It's just a different kind of substrate. In fact, some even argue the hypothesis is unprovable. How would we know if the simulation is detailed enough? It could hide its own code. Any glitch we see could be chalked up to quantum randomness. If the simulators didn't want us to find out, we never would. Then there's the ethical question. Would it matter if suffering in a simulation feels just as sharp, just as tragic? Then is it morally acceptable to simulate entire lives with grief, war, loneliness, and heartbreak? Still, the idea has captivated minds across disciplines. In art, it's inspired films like The Matrix, Inception, and The 13th Floor. In science, it's prompted real research on cosmic background radiation, fine-tuning, and digital physics. In philosophy, it's opened up radical new interpretations of reality. And in the stillness of night, perhaps, it touches something emotional. The loneliness of being human. The longing to know if someone's out there watching, caring, running the show. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's the universal desire to understand what we are. Flesh and bone. Yes. But maybe also code and light. So, tonight, when you close your eyes, ask yourself if this is all a simulation. Why was your character written with such depth? 11. Is love just a chemical? Or something more? Hormones can explain it, but not the aching. You lie there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, And for a moment, the room feels like a memory. That faint perfume, that laugh echoing across the years, not real. Not now, but unmistakably alive in your chest. And so the question comes softly, like a whisper that doesn't want to wake the world. Was it just oxytocin? Science is firm. It says love is measurable. PubMed journals confirm that when we fall in love, our brains light up like fireworks. Dopamine gives us the high. Oxytocin creates the bond. Serotonin balances the mood. And vasopressin builds long-term attachment. Love, according to the scans, is a biochemical cocktail stirred by evolution to keep us from wandering too far from one another. And yet, none of those molecules explain the way your breath caught when they first looked at you like you were more than the world, or the way your bones remembered them months after they left. If it were just a chemical, wouldn't it dissolve with time? But it doesn't. Not really. Rumi, the Sufi poet whose verses are still sung 800 years later, didn't talk about neurotransmitters. He spoke of a fire in the chest, a longing so deep it burned away the self. To him, love was not just human. It was divine hunger, a reaching back toward the source we came from. In Sufi texts, the beloved is both the person we love and the divine we cannot see. So when your heart aches, it's not just attachment, it's remembrance. Not dysfunction, but a form of spiritual homesickness. Carl Jung called this a projection that we fall in love with the parts of ourselves we've forgotten. That the beloved carries something sacred from our own unconscious. And when they leave, it's not just them we mourn, but the piece of ourselves they illuminated. That's why it hurts so strangely. That's why some people never quite fade, even when the years do. Anthropology shows us that nearly every ancient culture treated love as more than physical. In India, bhakti devotional love was a path to God. In Greek thought, there were many kinds of love: eros, philia, storge, agape. The highest, agape, was divine, transcendent, not transactional. In the Christian tradition, it was the love of God for humankind, and the kind we strive to reflect back: selfless, infinite, gentle. But there's something else. Something even more puzzling. Why does love survive death? Neuroscience tells us our hormones settle after heartbreak. Our bodies forget. But dreams don't. You've likely dreamed of someone who's gone. And in the dream, they felt as warm as the day you held them. No data explains that. No hormone accounts for the grief of a soul remembering a soul. Could this be a clue? There are theories, soft, poetic ones, that love is a form of memory that's not stored in the brain, that it lives in what some call the subtle body, the field of awareness that spans emotion, energy, and intuition. In Eastern philosophies, this might be prana or chi. In Catholic mysticism, it might be grace. So, what if love isn't either or? What if it's both biology and mystery? What if the chemicals are just the envelope, and the message inside is older than time? Some scientists, like neuropsychologist Jaak Panksepp, suggested that our emotional systems evolved from even earlier mammalian instincts: the need to protect, bond, mourn. He argued that the grief response after love's loss is not a malfunction, but an ancient survival mechanism. But he also admitted the intensity of human love, the poetry, the songs, The spiritual awakenings reaches far beyond what biology alone can justify. There's something untranslatable in love, something dreamlike, even when it's real. Maybe that's why even the greatest thinkers have struggled to define it. Plato said, "Love is the longing for the half we lost." Simone Weil believed that to love anything truly is to see the presence of God in it. And Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Love consists in this, that two solitudes protect and touch and greet each other. And then there's your own story, the one only you carry. The moment you knew, the day it broke, the silence that followed, and maybe the slow return of light. What science measures is useful, what you felt. Though that's the evidence, so is love just a chemical? Yes, and also, no, it is chemical, and cosmic, molecular, and mythic. It's the spark that builds civilizations, and the ache that makes poets weep. It's oxytocin in your blood, and it's the dream that still visits you at 3:00, Mom, when everything else is still except the truth you don't have words for. And maybe that's what love really is, something with no final explanation, but one you feel before you understand. 12. Is coincidence real? When strange patterns follow you through time, is it fate? Or your mind searching for meaning? You are walking down a quiet street. It's late. The sky tinged with violet. The air carrying the scent of something old. You think of someone you haven't seen in years. Moments later, your phone buzzes. It's them. Coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. This is where logic begins to tremble at the soft edges of experience, where things feel too connected, where events align with a kind of silent intelligence that leaves no fingerprints. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, called this phenomenon synchronicity. He wrote of meaningful coincidences, events that seem causally unrelated but feel linked by something deeper. A symbol, a moment, an emotion echoing through the world as if the cosmos is trying to whisper to you. In his 1952 book, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle, Jung described a moment in therapy. A woman recounted a dream of a golden scarab, and just then, a beetle struck the window, tapping insistently. It was a scarab-like insect, extremely rare in that region. Was this merely chance? Or was it the psyche, somehow tethered to the outer world in a web of invisible threads? Science, understandably, remains cautious. Coincidences, in their view, are inevitable. Statistically, the human mind lives among patterns. You meet thousands of people. You hear thousands of songs. That one name echoing twice in a day. A trick of probability. A brain honed by evolution to find meaning, perhaps too good at it. And yet, something stirs. You remember moments. The book that falls open to the very line you needed. The stranger on the train who says a sentence that mirrors your dream from the night before. The timing of a meeting that changes your life. Coincidence is the great in-between. Not quite miracle. Not quite math. Just a feeling that there's more. Physicist Wolfgang Pauli, a Nobel laureate and contemporary of Jung, became fascinated by these non-causal events. Together, they speculated that synchronicity might be a natural principle like gravity or electromagnetism, but operating not through force, but through meaning. Pauli, who contributed to quantum theory, saw parallels between Jung's psychic patterns and the strange behaviors of subatomic particles entanglement. uncertainty, non-locality. Two electrons, light years apart, can affect one another instantly, not through cause, but through relationship. It's called quantum entanglement, and it's real. If particles can be mysteriously linked, could minds? Modern neuroscience often dismisses this. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias or apophenia, the tendency to see connections in random data, can explain much. We remember the hits and forget the misses. We turn pattern into prophecy, but such explanations, while rational, don't capture the emotional truth of these moments. They don't explain why some coincidences bring tears, or why entire religious traditions are born from them. Take the I Ching, the Chinese book of changes, used for thousands of years. You throw coins, read hexagrams, but it's not about prediction. It's about resonance. What page opens? What symbol appears? It's not random, say the sages. It's the shape of your soul reflected in the mirror of the universe. In Sufi mysticism, 2. Signs and coincidences are seen as divine conversation. The beloved God hides within moments, gestures, echoes. Nothing is random. Everything is a form of love in disguise. Indigenous cultures often see time differently. To the Navajo or the Aboriginal Australians, stories, spirits, and ancestors are interwoven with the present. To dream of a snake and then see one in waking life isn't just coincidence, it's a message. To modern ears, that sounds like myth. But perhaps myth is how humans make meaning from mysteries we haven't yet learned how to measure. There's a strange comfort in thinking that it's all coincidence, that no one is watching, that you're free. And there's also a strange sadness in it, because something in you, some old animal part, still senses the dream beneath the day, still notices the birds moving just as you're about to speak a truth, still gets quiet when the song on the radio says exactly what you couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, there's a purpose to your noticing. Maybe coincidence isn't proof of fate, but an invitation to wake up, to pay attention, to participate. Because coincidence, whether real or invented by the mind, points toward something sacred, the yearning for meaning. You long for life to speak back, to know that the world isn't just dust and data, that your choices ripple, that your story matters. So perhaps the real question isn't, is coincidence real? But rather, are you still listening? 13. Our past life memories. Real children around the world recall lives they never lived. In a quiet village in Sri Lanka, a 4-year-old boy named Samith tells his parents vivid stories of being a rice merchant in a distant town, one that he's never visited, but describes in extraordinary detail. He names streets, shops, even family members he says were once his. When a researcher visits the town, everything checks out. The names, the layout, even the merchant's mysterious death by drowning exactly as the boy described. What are we supposed to do with stories like this? Around the world, children often between ages 2 and 6 report detailed memories of lives they've never lived. Some of these cases include facts they couldn't have possibly known. Names, professions, details of faraway homes and old family feuds. Many of them fade with time, as if the memories dissolve as the child grows older, as if remembering was never part of the plan. This phenomenon has fascinated researchers for decades, most notably Dr. Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia. who documented over 2,500 cases of children recalling previous lives. His scientific approach was simple: record what children say, then verify the facts independently. In some cases, there were birthmarks on the child's body matching the injuries that led to their alleged death in a past life. In others, entire families were reunited. One child even recognized their former mother in a crowd. But science, of course, demands caution. Could these children have learned the details through overheard conversations or subtle cues? Could suggestion, storytelling, or even the subconscious imagination account for what feels like reincarnation? Some researchers argue that such memories may be confabulations, composite stories created by the brain to make sense of scattered sensory input. Others, more skeptically, dismiss them as cultural artifacts in societies where reincarnation is commonly accepted. Children may be unconsciously encouraged to craft such narratives. And yet, there are always outliers, like the case of James Leininger, a boy from Louisiana who, at the age of 2, began having nightmares about being trapped in a crashing airplane. Over time, he shared increasingly specific details: the name of the aircraft carrier, the model of the plane, the names of fellow pilots. His parents, initially skeptical, traced these details to a W-2 pilot named James Houston Jr., who died in 1945. Everything matched, including obscure military references a toddler couldn't have invented. The field of past life research sits at the uncomfortable edge between science and mystery. Stevenson's successor, Dr. Jim Tucker, continues this work today, with a more neurocognitive lens. In his book Return to Life, Tucker explores whether consciousness might exist independently of the brain, a hypothesis entertained by quantum physicists and Buddhist philosophers alike. In Buddhist philosophy, the idea of rebirth isn't necessarily about a permanent soul returning. It's more like the flame of one candle lighting the next. A continuation, not a duplication. Hinduism offers a more structured view. Karma dictates what form the next life takes. And liberation, moksha, ends the cycle. In Catholicism, by contrast, reincarnation is denied, but the concept of the soul's eternal journey remains. Could past life memories be the mind's attempt to remember something that happened before identity began? Could they be dreams leaking in from another story once lived, once forgotten? And how would we ever know? In the end, the stories continue. Children continue to speak. Some grow out of it. Others feel haunted forever by memories that don't belong to them, yet still feel like home. Maybe these aren't just tales about death. Maybe they're secret echoes of life trying to be remembered. 14. Why does ancient music still move us? Sumerian scales, Egyptian hymns, they still stir emotion. Somewhere, in a desert ruin half swallowed by sand, there lies a broken tablet. On it, carved in delicate cuneiform, are the remnants of a hymn. It comes from ancient Ugarit, one of the oldest known notated pieces of music in the world. A 300-400-year-old lullaby, perhaps, written in Hurrian script. When reconstructed by musicologists, it sounds strangely familiar and deeply haunting. Why does this melody, born in a civilization long gone, still make the heart pause? Why do ancient Egyptian hymns, reconstructed from wall inscriptions and sung in recreated temples, feel like they were written not just for gods, but for us? Music, as it turns out, may be the closest thing we have to time travel. The earliest civilizations, Sumer, Egypt, Indus Valley, Shang China, didn't just build temples and cities. They made music. It accompanied their rituals, praised their gods, lulled their children, and lamented their dead. Instruments like the lyre, the pan flute, and the sistrum appear again and again in archaeological records. And while the notation is often lost or incomplete, the intention survives. In Mesopotamia, the ancient Sumerians used scales surprisingly similar to those used today. The diatonic scale, found on the Hurrian hymn, nor 6 mirrors, the 7-note scales familiar in Western music. The lyrics of this hymn were a prayer to Nikal, goddess of orchards and fertility. When sung, even in speculative reconstruction, it evokes a quiet ache, a longing that transcends time. Egyptian music was different but equally spiritual. According to inscriptions and depictions on temple walls, musicians played harps, flutes, and lutes in sacred rituals. The tones were meant to mimic the voices of the gods or the harmony of the spheres. The Book of the Dead even includes references to songs of becoming sounds that were believed to carry the soul into the afterlife. The philosopher Boethius, writing centuries later, believed in 3 forms of music: musica mundana, the music of the cosmos; musica humana, the harmony of the human body and soul; musica instrumentalis, the actual music we hear. Ancient music, especially sacred music, was rarely just for entertainment. It was a cosmic bridge, a vibration that echoed the order of heaven. But why does it still move us today? Some neuroscientists believe the emotional power of music lies in its structure. Rhythm mimics the heartbeat. Melody echoes the arc of speech. Minor keys can mirror sorrow. And harmonic intervals generate physical pleasure in the brain. This would explain the universality of music, even if styles differ wildly. Yet, this doesn't fully explain the eerie familiarity of music we shouldn't recognize. Why does the reconstruction of a Babylonian chant, played on a lyre, feel as intimate as a memory? Maybe it's because music is older than language. Archaeological finds suggest that flutes made from bird bones existed as far back as 40,000 years ago, long before writing. We sang before we spoke. We hummed before we built. In this sense, music might not belong to a specific culture or time. It may live in us, inherited through deep memory echoes passed down in our nervous systems, waiting to be unlocked. Sacred music, especially, taps into something deeper, the desire to feel connected to the divine, to the cosmos, to others. In Aboriginal Australian culture, the songlines are oral maps of the land melodies that literally encode geography, ancestry, and cosmology. To sing them is to remember. To walk them is to awaken the landscape. In ancient China, Confucius believed that music shaped moral character and harmonized society. In Vedic India, sound was considered the primal force of the universe, being the first vibration from which all reality unfolded. And today, when a reconstructed Assyrian hymn plays in a museum, or a chorus chants a 2,000-year-old Greek ode, something stirs, a resonance, a quiver in the ribs. We're not just hearing a song, we're hearing someone else's breath, someone else's offering to a God we no longer name. Maybe ancient music still moves us because it was never truly ancient. It speaks in a language older than time, And when we listen, really listen, it feels like something is being remembered. 15. Can consciousness exist outside the body? Some coma patients report out-of-body perception. In the hushed space between brain death and full awareness, stories begin to whisper tales of floating above the body, seeing doctors from above, hearing voices in corridors without ears to listen. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They are accounts, described in startling detail, by people who were clinically unconscious. And they've baffled both neuroscience and spiritual traditions for decades. You are lying still. Your body has shut down. Machines beep steadily. Yet somehow, your mind hovers above the scene, observing, remembering, even describing what happened while the EEG showed near-flat silence. These experiences are called OBEs, or out-of-body experiences. And they are one of the most confounding phenomena in the study of consciousness. What makes these stories especially strange is their consistency. Thousands of accounts have been collected by organizations like NDERF, Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, where individuals recount being detached from their bodies during cardiac arrest, trauma, anesthesia, or deep coma. One woman, during a brain aneurysm surgery, described the specific surgical tools used on her, tools she had never seen, and conversations between nurses while her auditory cortex was clinically inactive. How is this possible? Let's begin with the biology. The dominant scientific explanation suggests OBEs are a form of dissociation, the brain misinterpreting body signals due to trauma or stress. According to studies published in PubMed and Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, stimulation of the temporoparietal junction in the brain, the area where the sense of self is processed, can induce sensations of floating or perceiving oneself from outside the body. This is the region often disrupted during seizures, anesthesia, or oxygen deprivation. In short, when this part of your brain glitches, you might feel out of your body, though your consciousness never truly leaves. But this doesn't fully explain why many out-of-body experiencers report verified external events they could not have physically seen or heard. Some experiments, such as those in cardiac units, have even hidden images on high shelves, visible only from above, to test whether patients truly saw from an elevated perspective. Results have been inconclusive, but some reports remain curiously accurate. Enter the philosophical and spiritual interpretations. In Tibetan Buddhism, OBEs are not glitches, they're doorways. The Bardo Thodol, or Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes a phase after death where consciousness detaches from the physical form, wandering freely before reincarnation. Similarly, Sufi mystics and Vedic texts speak of the subtle body, a luminous counterpart to the physical form that can separate under meditation, trauma, or divine grace. In these traditions, the mind is not a product of the brain, but a traveler, temporarily housed within it. Modern psychology, influenced by thinkers like Carl Jung, sees OBEs as metaphors, symbols of disconnection, transformation, or trauma. You leave your body when reality becomes too painful. But not everyone agrees with the metaphorical approach. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist, has studied hundreds of near-death patients and published peer-reviewed research in The Lancet, suggesting that consciousness may not be entirely localized in the brain. If it were, he argues, we would not see coherent thought and memory during moments when brain activity ceases. Is he right? The debate remains open. Some neuroscientists argue that residual brain activity undetectable by current EEGs may still generate vivid experiences. Others suggest memory reconstruction plays a role. The mind fabricates a narrative after the fact to fill the gap. Yet, the accuracy of certain observations, such as describing a defibrillator paddle's serial number or repeating nurse dialogue, leaves even skeptics uneasy. Let's not forget indigenous and shamanic traditions. Across Africa, the Americas, and Asia, OBEs are not rare or pathological. They are trained experiences. Shamans report soul flight as a method of healing, journeying into other realms to retrieve knowledge or assist the dying. In the Amazon, the ayahuasca vine is considered a spiritual tool that allows consciousness to temporarily depart the body and return with insight. Could all of this neuroscience, ancient mysticism, anecdotal report be pointing to the same thing? Or are we just dreaming with unusual lucidity at the edge of death? You're lying still again. The monitor beeps. You feel a strange pull upward. The world slips into a hushed echo. Is it just a trick of neurons? Or are you touching something real? The whisper-thin veil between what we think we are and what we truly are. For now, the answer remains suspended somewhere just beyond the body. 16. Is math real or just a human tool? Pi, Fibonacci, and symmetry exist in nature regardless of humans. You stare at a sunflower, not just the golden spiral of its seeds, but the strange order beneath it, a pattern so precise, so silent. It feels almost divine. Numbers, sequences, ratios, unfolding in nature like a hidden language. A question arises, soft and ancient. Did we invent math to explain the world, or did the world give birth to math before we arrived? This is one of philosophy's most haunting puzzles, and one that mathematicians, physicists, and poets still argue over in hushed reverence. Let's begin with the surreal. In the branching of trees, the swirl of galaxies, the spiral of hurricanes, and the veins in a leaf, we find Fibonacci sequences, ratios that approximate the golden mean. The number pi appears in everything from the geometry of ripples in water to the curvature of space-time. Snowflakes form hexagons, and honeycombs build with perfect tessellation. These patterns exist whether or not a human eye observes them. Does that mean math is discovered, like a continent, or invented, like a map? According to Roger Penrose, in his provocative book, The Emperor's New Mind, mathematics is not a human creation. It's a realm we merely uncover. He suggests that mathematical truths exist in a Platonic world of their own, timeless, perfect, and non-physical. Just as we didn't invent gravity, we named it after feeling its pull. Penrose argues that we didn't create P. We simply noticed it carved into the curvature of circles. This is known as mathematical Platonism, the idea that math exists outside of time, space, and mind. That even if no human ever lived, the angles of a triangle would still sum to 180 degrees on a flat plane. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, many philosophers throughout history from Plato to Kurt Gödel have believed in this vision of mathematics as a kind of metaphysical truth. But others aren't so sure. The formalists and constructivists, including thinkers like Wittgenstein, argue that math is a language, a symbolic system humans built to model the world, not something that exists independently of it. Just like we invented musical notation to describe sound, we invented numbers to describe quantity. pattern, and change. In this view, math doesn't exist without a mind to interpret it. It's useful, but not eternal. And yet, even in abstraction, math often predicts reality. Einstein's equations, scribbled in the quiet of thought, later revealed black holes, decades before we ever observed them. Theoretical physics uses pure mathematics to describe particles and dimensions we've never seen, and then nature responds, as if it was already listening. Is this coincidence? Or is it evidence that the universe is written in math? Galileo thought so. He wrote, "The book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. To understand the cosmos, we must learn to read its symbols." And yet, others wonder if we're just projecting patterns onto chaos, finding meaning where there is none, in the way we see shapes in clouds or constellations in the night sky. But the question runs deeper still. If math is real, where does it live? Not in atoms or photons, not in space or time, and not in the mind alone, for a mind can forget math. But the spiral of a galaxy will continue its curve. Perhaps, then, math belongs to a third realm, the realm of unseen order. Imagine this long before humans spoke. The ratio between a circle's circumference and diameter was still p. Before architects drew domes, hexagons blossomed in basalt and beehives. The Pythagorean theorem worked in ancient stone, unaware it had a name. Could it be that math is woven into the fabric of being, not as an invention, but as a revelation? Or is it just the tool we use to translate wonder into language? The truth may lie in the paradox itself. Math feels invented and discovered, a mirror and a map, a human construction that eerily reflects the bones of the cosmos. So, as you gaze again at that sunflower, with its Fibonacci twist, ask yourself softly, did you find the pattern? Or did the pattern find you? 17. What is the self-Buddhism and neuroscience both ask? Who is observing? Close your eyes. Not to shut out the world, but to listen to the one inside. That silent place where thought arises, where memory flickers, where something or someone is always watching. But who is that? Who watches when you watch? This is not just a question of poetry. It is one of the oldest riddles of human experience. When you say I, who exactly do you mean? Your body, your thoughts, your memories, your soul, or something more elusive, the one who knows your thinking. Philosophers and mystics have argued over this for millennia. And in the quiet heart of both Buddhism and neuroscience, a strange idea has emerged. There may be no self at all. Let's begin with the Buddhist view, gentle but radical. The Buddha taught anatta, or no self. Not that you don't exist, but that the thing you call self is not a permanent, fixed entity. It's more like a river flowing sensations, perceptions, thoughts, intentions, consciousness constantly changing. What you think of as you is a bundle of experiences, clung to by habit. There's no little pilot sitting behind your eyes, just moment after moment, flickering and vanishing. And so the question is asked in meditation, who is observing if you look closely enough? The I dissolves. There's seeing, but no seer. Hearing, but no hearer. Thought, but no thinker. Neuroscience, centuries later, comes to a strikingly similar conclusion. In The Ego Tunnel, Thomas Metzinger, a philosopher of mind and cognitive scientist, argues that the self is a model, not a thing. The brain constructs a simulation, a virtual character, complete with a sense of being located somewhere in space, making choices, having a history. This model is incredibly useful for survival, but it's not real. It's a tunnel seamless, convincing, but ultimately empty of a solid core. According to brain research, there's no central place in the brain where the self lives. No self-center lighting up in scans. Identity appears to be the product of many systems working together: memory, emotion, attention, body mapping, creating a kind of illusion that you are a single, unified entity. This doesn't mean you're not real, but it means that what you feel to be real might be constructed. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, in its entry on personal identity, outlines how fragile this concept has always been. The self changes constantly. We forget. We grow. We age. Are you still the same you from 5 years ago? What if you lost your memory tomorrow? Would you still exist? The philosopher David Hume once wrote, "I never can catch myself without a perception." Every time he looked inward, he found not a self, but thoughts passing like shadows. Just like the Buddhists, he saw a bundle, not a being. And yet, something persists. Even if it's an illusion, it's a powerful one. We feel continuity. We remember. We plan. We dream. There is a narrator in our heads, telling the story of me, even if that story is rewritten every night. So, what is the self? It might be nothing more than a story told by the brain, echoing across time. Or it might be, as some mystics suggest, the unnameable awareness that simply is the one that sees, without needing to be seen. As you drift now, feel the edges of your eye blur a little. You're not your name, not your thoughts, not your pain or even your past. You are the space in which they arise, the quiet watcher, the one who asks, who is watching? And perhaps that question is the answer. 18. Is Earth a living, aware being? Gaia theory sees the planet as a conscious organism. Take a deep breath. The oxygen entering your lungs right now was sculpted by ancient algae, balanced by forests, filtered by oceans. Every inhalation a collaboration across millennia. Every heartbeat synced with rhythms not entirely your own. Now imagine this. What if the Earth itself is alive? Not just teeming with life, but is life. A single, breathing, self-regulating being. This is the whisper of the Gaia hypothesis, a radical idea proposed by British scientist James Lovelock in the 1970s. Named after the ancient Greek goddess of Earth, Gaia theory suggests that our planet is not just a stage where life plays out. It's a living system, capable of maintaining its own balance, much like your own body does. Lovelock, along with microbiologist Lynn Margulis, observed that Earth's atmosphere, oceans, soil, and climate work together in surprisingly self-regulating ways. The oxygen levels in our air remain steady. Temperatures fluctuate within a life-friendly range. Salinity in the oceans stays just right for marine life. It's as if Earth is actively keeping itself alive. Could this be more than coincidence? Lovelock proposed that life on Earth does not simply adapt to the planet, it shapes the planet. Microbes adjust the chemistry of the oceans. Trees modulate carbon dioxide levels. Clouds reflect sunlight. All of it. Unknowingly. Contributing to a planetary feedback loop that maintains habitability, the way your own body sweats to cool down or shivers to stay warm. But what does it mean to say Earth is alive? And could it even be aware? Here's where the line between science and mystery blurs. Some thinkers take Gaia further, suggesting the planet may possess a kind of distrib not like a human brain, but an ancient, slow, vast awareness. A mind made of forest roots and fungal webs, ocean currents and tectonic breath. A pulse that takes centuries to feel. Indigenous cultures around the world have always treated the earth as a living being. From Andean Pachamama to the Aboriginal dreaming. From Hindu Bhumi Devi to the animist traditions of Siberia and Africa. The earth has long been seen not as it, but as she. A mother. A mind. A mystery. Western science, for a time, dismissed such views. But Gaia reopened the door. It gave language to an intuition many had buried that we are not separate from Earth. We are cells in her body, thoughts in her dream. Still, Gaia theory has its critics. Some argue it's metaphor, not mechanism, that there's no intention behind the planet's systems. No central mind pulling strings. But perhaps that's the point. Gaia isn't a being that thinks, but a being that is. Much like you don't decide how to heal a wound or digest your food. Your body simply knows. So might the earth slow, vast, breathing, regulating herself without plan or speech. As you rest now, imagine yourself not as an isolated self, but as a thought passing through Gaia's dream. Your breath hers, your heartbeat part of a planetary rhythm. You are not on Earth. You are of Earth. A moment in her mind. Maybe the Earth is alive. Maybe she is listening. Maybe you've been inside her lullaby all along. 19. Who decides what's right or wrong? Is morality objective or cultural? Let's begin in stillness. Feel the weight of the question settle in your chest. Who decides what's right? What's wrong? Is there a compass buried deep inside you? Or are you just spinning with the winds of culture, time, and place? Somewhere, a child is taught that obedience is virtue. Elsewhere, a child is taught that rebellion is courage. Both grow up believing they are good. Both would weep at injustice. But their definitions don't match. So, who is right? This question, ancient, tender, unsettling, lives at the heart of moral philosophy. And no one has answered it for certain. But across time and thought, two great paths emerge. One says morality is objective. Like math or gravity, goodness exists whether we believe in it or not. Under this view, some things are always right: kindness, honesty, justice. Some things are always wrong: cruelty, betrayal, domination. Thinkers like Plato believed in eternal moral truths, hovering in a realm of ideals, waiting to be discovered. Religious traditions often agree. From the Ten Commandments to Dharma to natural law, many faiths teach that right and wrong are written into the fabric of the universe, carved by gods, cosmic order, or divine wisdom. But the other path is softer and stranger. It says morality is a cultural invention. That right and wrong shift with time, place, and perspective. This is the path of moral relativism, a view held by many anthropologists and some modern philosophers. The argument is simple if morality were universal. Why do cultures disagree so much? In one society, eating your ancestors is sacred. In another, it's unthinkable. One group honors arranged marriage. Another calls it coercion. What seems just in ancient Rome may seem barbaric today. What you call freedom, another may call abandonment. The philosopher Ruth Benedict once said, "The concept of normality is culturally defined, and the same may be true for goodness. But this view is not without its perils. If morality is entirely relative, how do we condemn atrocities? How do we fight for justice across cultures? Can we still say slavery is wrong? Genocide, torture? This is where the conversation trembles. Some philosophers seek a middle ground, a kind of moral pluralism. They suggest there may be core values that span cultures, like minimizing harm or honoring reciprocity. Even if the expressions of those values differ, the Yale Open Course on Ethics explores this balance. How reason, empathy, and shared humanity might help us navigate morality even in a fractured world. But perhaps, as you drift into sleep, the question isn't whether morality is real. Perhaps the question is, who do you become when no one is watching? When the crowd is silent and the rules are blurred? What voice still speaks inside you? That whisper old as firelight, soft as conscience, may not give answers, but it holds the weight of the question. And maybe that's enough. 20. Is randomness real? Quantum physics shows events without clear causes. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine tossing a coin into the black velvet of the cosmos. Heads or tails? Now imagine that coin doesn't flip in the air. Instead, it hovers, suspended, undefined. Both outcomes exist. And the moment you look, reality chooses. This is not a metaphor. It's quantum mechanics. In the strange, subatomic world, randomness isn't just real, it may be the rule. Let's begin with the double-slit experiment, one of the most haunting demonstrations in all of physics. When particles like electrons are shot through two slits and not observed, they act like waves, interfering, rippling, behaving as though they pass through both slits at once. But when observed, they collapse into particles. One path, one outcome. What changed? Only this: that someone was watching. This isn't mere chaos. It's fundamental indeterminacy. Quantum events don't have causes in the way we're used to. Instead of definite outcomes, they offer probabilities. The spin of an electron, the decay of an atom, the location of a photon. Each is governed not by law, but by likelihood. This idea disturbed Einstein. He famously protested, "God does not play dice with the universe," but dice seem to be rolling everywhere. In fact, some interpretations of quantum theory, like the Copenhagen interpretation, accept that certain events simply have no cause. They are truly, irreducibly random. Does this mean determinism, the idea that every effect has a cause, is dead? Not necessarily. Some physicists, like those behind Bohmian mechanics or superdeterminism, argue that hidden variables might explain these uncertainties. That randomness is just a mask for deeper, undiscovered rules. But even then, it raises the question, if we can't access those rules, are they any more real than magic? Others go even further. The many worlds interpretation suggests that all outcomes do happen, just in separate, branching realities. So that coin you flipped, in one universe it landed heads, in another, tails. In a third, it never landed at all. So is randomness real? In the realm of quantum physics, yes, at least as far as we can observe. Reality, at its smallest scales, is fuzzy, shadowed, uncertain. Not because we're ignorant, but because that's how the universe is. And yet, in the middle of that uncertainty, patterns emerge, galaxies spin, birds migrate. Your heart beats with quiet rhythm, order born from chaos, purpose woven through unpredictability. Perhaps randomness isn't the opposite of meaning. Perhaps it's the space in which meaning is made. So tonight, as you drift off, let the mystery unfold around you. The coin hovers, the stars flicker, and in the spaces between certainty you dream. 21. Why do we exist at all? The simplest, hardest question. Why you? Why now? It's a question you've likely whispered to the dark at some point. When the noise fades, when the world is quiet, when you're not searching for what to do next, but for why you're doing anything at all. Why are you here, not just you, but anything? Why is there something rather than nothing? Philosophers have called this the most profound question of all, and perhaps the most unanswerable. Leibniz asked it in the 17th century. So did Heidegger. So did your inner child. Albert Camus didn't flinch from it. In The Myth of Sisyphus, he asked, "Does the absurd dictate death?" For Camus, the absurd isn't chaos. It's the conflict between your hunger for meaning and the universe's silence. You ask why, and the stars say nothing. That silence, he says, can feel unbearable. But instead of despair, Camus suggests defiance. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. In other words, even if the universe never answers, you get to choose how you live inside the question. Some thinkers take a cosmic approach. Physicists point out that the very existence of matter of stars, atoms, breath defies all odds. If the Big Bang had been a fraction faster, no galaxies would have formed. If certain physical constants had shifted ever so slightly, atoms couldn't bind. This is sometimes called the fine-tuning problem, and it leaves us with dizzying possibilities. Perhaps the universe is designed for life. Perhaps there are infinite universes, and we just happen to be in the lucky one. Perhaps luck is all there is. Religious traditions answer differently. In Genesis, we are made in God's image. In the Bhagavad Gita, existence is the dance of the eternal self through infinite forms. In Buddhist thought, the self is a dream, and awakening means seeing through the illusion. Each of these is a lens, not a solution. But perhaps the question isn't meant to be solved. Perhaps it is meant to be lived. Why do you exist? Maybe because a billion stars collapsed and reformed to make the calcium in your bones. Maybe because evolution stumbled upon consciousness and then asked itself what it had done. Maybe because someone needs your voice. Or maybe because the question itself gives shape to your life. As philosopher Robert Nozick said, the explanation of everything must be a self-explaining whole. But maybe wholeness comes not from knowing why you are, but from becoming who you are. So tonight, beneath the hush of sky and sleep, don't try to wrestle the answer to the ground. Instead, lie beside the question. Hold it. Let it breathe. Why do you exist? Because you do. And that, somehow, is everything. 22. Do we have a purpose, or did we invent it? If the universe is aimless, is meaning still meaningful? Some nights, under the hush of sleep, a question curls its way into your chest. What if all this, your plans, your past, your pain, doesn't point anywhere? What if purpose is not given, but made? For thousands of years, we looked up to the stars and assumed they were watching, that some divine architect laid out the scaffolding of your life, that every joy, every loss, was part of a plan too vast to see. From the Psalms to the Upanishads, from Islamic cosmology to Confucian order, we've long woven the idea that the universe has intention, and that you, tiny, temporary, you are part of it. But modern science offered a quieter cosmos. No voice booming from clouds. No cosmic scorecard. Just particles and probability, entropy and time. So, where does that leave your purpose? Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, faced this chasm head-on. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." He saw people survive unimaginable horror, not because they were the strongest, but because they still had a why, a reason to get up, a person to return to, a hope they could cradle like a flame. But here's the twist: Frankl didn't believe that purpose was handed down from the sky. He believed it was discovered even in despair. He called it logotherapy, the idea that your deepest drive isn't pleasure or power, but meaning. And this meaning, he said, could come from three places: creating something like work, art, or acts of love, experiencing something beauty, nature, or intimacy, suffering well, finding dignity even in pain. This is not a shallow motivational quote. It's an act of rebellion. If the universe has no blueprint for you, then every small moment you choose to care, to build, to love, that's you giving the void a shape. And this, too, is echoed in philosophy. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy notes that many existentialists, from Sartre to Simone de Beauvoir, believe that while there may be no inherent purpose to life, there is freedom. And with freedom comes responsibility, the chance to create values, not discover them. Sartre famously said, "Existence precedes essence," which means you are not born with a built-in definition. You define yourself through action. You're a verb, not a noun. Still, this freedom can feel like a burden. You may long for someone, anyone, to tell you what you're for. But perhaps, like an artist staring at a blank canvas, the absence of instruction is a gift. So, do you have a purpose? Maybe not one etched into the stars. But what if purpose isn't found in the grand design, but in the fact that you looked for it at all? What if the search itself is sacred? Tonight, as the dark folds around you, let that question settle into your bones. Let it glow faintly, not with answers, but with presence. Maybe the purpose of life is not to know your purpose, but to live as if you matter, to shape meaning like a potter shapes clay, messy, human, warm. Because even if the universe is silent, you don't have to be. You've wandered through questions older than language, and maybe softer than answers, not to solve them but to feel their shape, to let the silence after the question become its own kind of truth. You've seen how meaning can be born not from certainty, but from care, from courage, from choosing to create purpose even when no blueprint is given. And in that choice, in that quiet defiance against the void, there is something deeply human, something holy. So now, let your body rest. Let the mind soften its grip. There's nothing more to solve tonight, only to drift. In the safety of mystery, breathe gently. Feel the rhythm of a world that doesn't need you to understand it, only to be part of it. Because even if the stars offer no map, you are still allowed to make a way. Now you're safe. The world can wait. Sweet dreams.